For weeks, the whispers about the Whittakers had grown louder, spreading through live streams, comment sections, and side-channel phone calls that never added up. People claimed they were protecting Betty and Larry. Others swore they were exposing lies. But the deeper the chaos sank, the more it became clear that no one actually knew what was real anymore. Except one person, Justin. He wasn't a filmmaker, not a content creator, not someone trying to turn tragedy into views. He was a man who had picked up his phone one day, heard the shaking in Betty's voice, and decided he wasn't going to ignore it. The Whittakers needed help, real help. Not promises, not theatrics, not grand declarations on social media. And Justin knew that if he didn't stand up now, no one else would. The breaking point came quietly. Betty had allegedly told viewers during a live stream that Justin had never called them. Not once. People clipped it, repeated it, mocked him over it. They said he was making things up. They said he was inserting himself where he didn't belong. They said he was lying for attention. Justin listened to all of it. Then he opened his phone, scrolled through the record of calls made, and realized he was done trying to stay quiet. If the truth was the only thing he had left, he was going to put it all on the table. When he reached out to Toddy, his voice was steady but exhausted. "I want to clear this up," he said. "I don't want to fight. I don't want to humiliate anyone. But I'm not going to sit here and let people say I never called when I did, again and again." He sent the timestamps. He sent the screenshots. And he asked Toddy to play the audio. From there, everything shifted. The audio begins with him calling the Whittaker home. Patient, polite, waiting through the familiar static and delayed clicks of an old phone system. When Betty finally answers, her voice is warm but strained. She sounds tired, the kind of tired that lives somewhere deeper than sleep can fix. Justin gently explains why he's calling. The permit for the pole, the meter, the trailer, everything he'd been planning to bring to give them a safer place to live. He talks her through every step, the way someone does when they want to help but don't want to overwhelm. Betty listens. She says she'll talk to Larry. She says she appreciates him. She laughs at one point, a soft, fragile, grateful sound, and Justin's voice softens too, like he's talking to someone he cares about. When Larry gets on the phone, Justin goes through the permit details again. Larry, confused but cooperative, agrees to go to the courthouse. He says yes to the electrician, yes to checking prices, yes to the steps needed to bring in a home that would finally lift them out of the sinking structure they'd been surviving in for years. There is no anger on the call, no manipulation, no screaming, no threats, just an exhausted man trying to help an exhausted family. But when the audio ends, Toddy quietly addresses the real issue, the growing fracture in the online world around the Whittakers. Where had the truth gone? When did everyone become enemies? Why was helping suddenly treated like a crime? The comments demanding proof. The accusations about money. The claims that Justin was inserting himself. And the constant shifting stories. Patrick's money is frozen. Eric's accounts are locked. The settlement is coming. No, wait. The settlement already came. No, wait. The settlement can't come because of something else. Justin had listened to all of it. But he knew something none of them did. The family wasn't sitting comfortably in the middle of that online war. They were sitting in a collapsing house, trying to understand why strangers suddenly had opinions about their lives. And while people argued from the comfort of their keyboards, Betty was waking up worried about how she'd make it through the day. Larry was trying to fix things with whatever tools he could find. And the three most vulnerable, Timmy, Ray, and Lorraine, were depending on their caregivers to keep the world from swallowing them whole. Justin had seen it firsthand. He had walked through the yard. He had talked to Betty when she was alone and scared. He had watched the situation deteriorate under the weight of rumors, harassment, and outsiders with loud voices but no compassion. So he made a decision. He told Toddy, "I'm willing to go on live with them. Face to face. Civil conversation. No yelling. No cussing. I just want the truth. Let's get everyone together and ask the questions that need answering. And even then, he wasn't trying to turn it into a spectacle. He didn't want a show. He wanted clarity. He said something that stuck with Toddy and with anyone who heard it afterward. I don't talk to too many people without recording. Not because I want to trap anyone, but because I want proof when I'm telling the truth. That was the moment people realized how deeply the lies had cut. Justin didn't want to be the guy defending himself. He didn't want to keep receipts. He didn't want to record conversations with elderly people he genuinely cared about. But he had to, because the narrative online had turned into a weapon. The recordings weren't ammunition. They were survival. When he mentioned having 99 recordings, calls with Elizabeth, calls with Gloria, calls with the people who had inserted themselves between him and the family, he didn't sound proud. He sounded beaten down, like a man who never expected to be dragged into a fight, but refused to run away from it once he was there. He had a specific example, one that bothered him more than the others. Gloria telling him that Betty and Larry would be going to Eric's attorney to receive money owed to them. Then later, Gloria denying ever saying it. People believing the denial instantly. Justin didn't argue. He didn't get angry. He didn't fight back online. He simply said, I have it recorded. I'll let her explain it face to face. He wasn't seeking drama. He was seeking accountability. But there was something deeper, something heavy, in his voice when he began talking about Betty. His breathing was strained. His tone softened, almost breaking. Right now, he said, whether I die tomorrow or live another 20 years, the Whittakers, Betty Whittaker, is more important to me than anything in this world. It hit Toddy hard. It hit listeners hard. It hit anyone with a conscience hard. Because for all the noise online, all the accusations, all the name-calling, Justin's motivation was simple, human, uncomplicated. He loved them, not in a romantic way, not in a possessive way, not in the unhealthy way others before him had shown. He loved them the way people should love the vulnerable, by defending them, by advocating for them, by being willing to stand up when no one else would. He even hesitated during the call, admitting something many people misunderstand. Sometimes I want to tell someone on live, hey, I love you. But some people don't like that. They don't get it. It's just who I am. I'm an old country boy. We love people openly. But love had gotten him accused. Love had gotten him attacked. Love had gotten him blocked, silenced, and blamed. And yet, he didn't stop. He laid everything out for Toddy. The interference from outsiders. The phone calls being blocked. The way Gloria inserted herself and demanded to oversee his arrival. The sudden appearance of Elizabeth, asking endless questions about what he was bringing and why. And then the hit that shook him. Kesha messaging him that Gloria had taken Betty to the state police to file a report against him for recording conversations. Everything twisted. Everything turned into suspicion. Everything became a reason to treat him like an enemy. But Justin didn't crack. He didn't lash out. He didn't retaliate. He said one thing, steady and clear. It's not illegal. Only one person has to know the call is being recorded. But they don't check the truth. They just repeat the garbage. When the call wound down, he could barely breathe from the stress. He apologized for rambling. He apologized for being sick. He apologized for caring too much. Toddy told him to rest. Justin refused. As soon as I'm better, we're going to tackle this. A lot needs to come out. He wasn't running from the fight. He was preparing to finish it. By the time the call ended, one thing was unmistakably clear. Justin wasn't backing down. Not from the lies. Not from the people twisting the story. Not from the exhaustion. And definitely not from helping the Whittakers. He had taken a stand. And the showdown was only beginning. Comment below, what do you think? By the time word of Justin's recordings spread through the community, The fragile balance around the Whittakers had shattered completely. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Everyone seemed to believe they alone understood the real story. But the truth was this: the only people who had actually been there, standing beside Betty, sitting with Larry, seeing the collapsing structure with their own eyes, could fit in one small room. And Justin was one of them. His voice had become the center of a storm he never asked for. A man who once quietly purchased groceries, helped with small errands, and checked in on Betty the way a neighbor might, had somehow become the target of online mobs, accusations, and strangers determined to silence him. But for all the noise, only one thing pushed him forward: the knowledge that Betty and Larry were being used, manipulated, and twisted into props in a battle they never understood. The more Justin watched the online drama escalate, the more he realized that the Whittakers were being surrounded by people with ulterior motives. Some wanted recognition. Some wanted revenge. Some wanted content. Some wanted to shape the narrative for their own benefit. But none of them were thinking about what the family actually needed. For Justin, the breaking point came with what he called the interception. The moment he realized that someone was standing between him and the family, blocking his calls, feeding them information, turning them against the very people trying to help. He noticed it when Betty's tone changed. He noticed it when Larry stopped answering as often. He noticed it when Gloria began speaking on their behalf, inserting herself into every conversation like a gatekeeper. In the audio, Justin explained it plainly. "She's intercepting my calls," he said, "twisting what I say, blocking what I'm trying to do." His voice didn't carry anger. It carried disappointment, and beneath that, pain, because he knew what would come next. The moment someone with influence gets close to Betty, the story shifts. Suddenly, Betty never remembered conversations. Suddenly, Larry didn't recall agreeing. Suddenly, everything Justin had said, planned, or offered was rewritten into something sinister. Not because Betty was lying, not because Larry was lying, but because someone was whispering in their ears. Justin knew it. Toddy knew it. And anyone paying attention knew it too. The trailer situation was the perfect example. After weeks of planning, after arranging the transport, after confirming every detail of the setup, after securing the utilities, locations, and arrangements needed to move forward, Elizabeth appeared out of nowhere. She demanded to know what he was bringing. She demanded to know when he was arriving. She demanded to oversee everything, even though she had never been involved before. And then, hours before he was set to arrive, she told him not to come. The Whittakers were waiting on a home that never arrived. Not because Justin failed them, but because the people around them pushed him away. He didn't respond with rage. He didn't run to social media. Instead, he said something that made Toddy pause. "It don't take much to back up a trailer, level it, hook water, hook septic, and put in a meter pole. I had everything ready. Everything. But the interference kept building until I couldn't tell what was helping them and what was hurting them." He wasn't confused. He wasn't incompetent. He wasn't backing out. He was being blocked. To outsiders, the situation looked like chaos. But from Justin's perspective, it was something far more troubling: the deliberate dismantling of any attempt to help the family independently without the control of certain individuals who had gotten comfortable holding power over the household. Justin described it with painful clarity: the rapid-fire sequence of people inserting themselves between him and the Whittakers. First Elizabeth, then Gloria, then Kesha, each one bringing drama, confusion, warnings, accusations, messages, and sudden demands that never existed before. He told Toddy that Kesha had texted him, claiming that Gloria had taken Betty to the state police to file a complaint against him for recording conversations. But instead of panicking, Justin explained the truth calmly. "It's not illegal," he said. "Only one party has to know the call is being recorded." He didn't want a loophole. He wanted a safeguard. Because every time he tried to help, someone else was rewriting the story. He made another stunning admission. He had 99 recorded conversations, each one time-stamped, each one showing precisely when he spoke to the family, what they said, what they asked for, and what he was trying to do. And not one of those recordings contained manipulation. Not one contained threats. Not one contained anything close to the lies being spread about him. But he didn't threaten to leak them. He didn't wave them like weapons. Instead, he said, I want to sit with them face to face and ask questions. Let them answer. Let them speak for themselves. Then, at the end, I'll play what really happened. I want the truth, not humiliation. It was the first time anyone in the entire online mess had taken a stand without attacking, without deflecting, without performing for an audience. He wasn't trying to go viral. He wasn't trying to build a platform. He wasn't trying to destroy anyone. He just wanted the truth. That's when the conversation took an emotional turn, one that revealed how deeply Justin had invested himself into this family. His voice changed. His breath grew shallow, and he began to describe what Betty meant to him. Right now, whether I die tomorrow or live another 20 years, Betty Whittaker is more important to me than anything in this world. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a performance. It was a man speaking from a place of sincerity that most people will never risk showing publicly. He talked about seeing how the Whittakers lived going all the way back to the early footage. He talked about watching what had happened to them over the years. He talked about the way cameras came, strangers came, influencers came. Everyone showed up to get something from them. Views, clicks, donations, clout, content. But while everyone else was benefiting, the family remained in poverty, confusion, and fear. I'm old country, he said. We're raised to love people without shame. God wants us to love everyone. I tell people I love them because I mean it. And then he said something even harder to hear. I'm getting bashed really hard for wanting to help them, and I don't understand why. That line echoed through the viewers who listened later. Because in all the noise, accusations, lies, shifting narratives, no one had stopped to ask why a man helping an elderly woman and her disabled family would be attacked for caring. Toddy assured him the truth mattered. Justin agreed. But then he said something that exposed the real heart of the conflict. I want to help Betty and the 3 in state custody, and I don't understand why people want to hate me for wanting to help somebody that needs help bad. There were people out there who didn't want the Whittakers to receive outside help unless they controlled it. People who didn't want Justin stepping in because it disrupted their position. And people who manipulated the family, intentionally or not, into pushing away anyone who threatened their influence. No wonder, Justin said quietly, they're in the situation they're in. Even in his exhaustion, his voice breaking, his breath catching, he insisted on continuing the conversation. He insisted that once he recovered from being sick, he wanted to bring everything to light. He wanted Toddy to be there when the truth finally confronted the lies head on. Not for revenge. Not for drama, not for ego, because the Whittakers deserved someone willing to stand in front of a storm on their behalf and not run away when it got ugly. By the end of the call, Justin sounded like a man fighting 2 battles at once, one against the sickness weighing down his body and one against the sickness weighing down the community circling the Whittakers. He didn't know what the next days would bring. He didn't know who would turn on him next. He didn't know which lie would surface tomorrow, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wasn't giving up. Not on them. Not on the truth. Not on the promise he made to himself the first day he called Betty and realized how alone she truly was. Justin was taking a stand, and this time, he wasn't standing alone. Comment below, what do you think? The tension surrounding the Whittaker family had transformed from confusion into something far heavier, like a weight that settled over everyone involved. By the time part of Justin's recordings made their way into public discussion, It was no longer a simple disagreement or a misunderstanding. It had become a full-scale showdown between truth, manipulation, and a handful of people still determined to fight for what was right. Justin, sick, exhausted, and overwhelmed, found himself in the center of a conflict he never asked for, but also one he refused to walk away from. He had made promises. He had seen conditions firsthand. He had spoken to Betty, listened to her, cared about her. Now he understood exactly how deeply others had distorted the narrative around her household. The more recordings he reviewed, the more messages he replayed, the clearer it became that Betty and Larry were not the sources of the chaos. They were the victims of it. Every lie told in their name, every accusation supposedly coming from them, every rumor spread online under the guise of protecting them. None of it matched their actual voices. Justin had the proof. But proof isn't enough when people don't want the truth. Toddy knew this better than anyone. He had been in the crossfire too. Email accusations, attacks, lies, attempts to discredit him. And all he had done was give the family a platform to speak. That alone was enough to make him a target. The two men understood something important. Once someone in the Whittakers' orbit decided to dominate their narrative, anyone else who stepped in became an enemy. It wasn't about help. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about the family at all. It was about control. Justin's voice trembled slightly as he explained the pattern forming behind the scenes. First, people aligned with Betty. Then, after receiving private messages or meetings, they suddenly switched sides, repeating statements that didn't sound like her at all. Even people who barely knew her spoke with authority on what she supposedly wanted, thought, or asked for. One afternoon, Justin brought this up directly to Toddy. "You ever notice how fast things change when someone new gets close to her?" he asked. "One day they're saying she wants help. Next day, they're saying she never asked for nothing. Then the next day, they're saying she's mad at me, even though she ain't said a word to me." Toddy agreed. He'd heard it too many times to dismiss. In private, Betty expressed gratitude. On camera, she expressed confusion. Under influence, her tone shifted completely. It wasn't manipulation on her part. Betty had always been consistent. It was the people around her who changed the atmosphere around the household. Gloria's involvement unsettled Justin the most. She appeared just days before the trailer move was scheduled, inserting herself into every decision. She questioned every step Justin took, demanded detailed explanations, insisted on being physically present for everything. And yet she didn't contribute anything to the work being done. Justin replayed his call with Betty for Toddy, pointing out the exact moment Gloria stepped into the conversation, speaking as if she had authority over the family. "I think she's planted there," Justin said firmly. "I think she's working for the other side." Toddy didn't argue. He didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. None of the interference existed before Gloria or Elizabeth began inserting themselves into the situation. When Justin explained how Elizabeth blocked his calls, the emotional hit was even harder. "I don't understand why she's doing it," he said quietly. "Betty deserves honesty, not people trying to control what she hears." For Justin, this wasn't drama. It wasn't about being right. It wasn't about internet battles. It was about the Whittakers' dignity. He had watched the family slowly lose control of their own story. First, outsiders spoke for them. Then outsiders argued over them. Finally, outsiders used them, each claiming to care, but all angling for influence. While everyone else was busy fighting, the only people suffering were the ones who never went online. Betty, Larry, and the three who had been taken into state custody. Justin knew he couldn't change the past, but he could expose the present. "I want them face to face," he told Toddy. "Let them answer questions direct. No whispering, no interference, just the truth." It was a risky idea. bringing everyone together in a live conversation. Justin, Toddy, and the people twisting the narrative could explode in 100 different ways. Toddy warned him. If too many people show up, it gets messy, he said. They start yelling. They start accusing. It turns into a circus. Justin understood. But he also understood something even more important. People lie differently when they're alone versus when they're confronted with the truth in front of an audience. He wanted them to say their claims out loud, on the record, without backup, without manipulation, without someone feeding them lines from behind a curtain. Because when confronted, truth stands firm, but lies fall apart. As the discussion grew deeper, Justin's condition worsened. His breath grew heavier. His voice began to strain. But the moment Toddy suggested resting, Justin refused. I gotta clear this up, he said. This ain't about me. It's about Betty. It wasn't lost on either of them that he was doing more for the family than people who claimed to love them loudly online. While others demanded attention, Justin quietly documented everything. While others stirred chaos, Justin filed paperwork, made calls, organized help. While others yelled about caring, Justin spent nights checking on Betty when she was confused or alone. And still, incredibly, he was the one under attack. He paused mid-sentence, catching his breath before saying something that hit Toddy like a punch. It's crazy, Todd. I'm getting bashed hard for trying to help seniors who needed someone. People hate me because I want to help 3 people in state custody. That don't make no sense. Why they mad at that? He wasn't asking for sympathy. He was asking for logic, something the entire situation had long abandoned. Toddy tried to reassure him, but Justin had already accepted the reality. I'm going to get hate no matter what, but I know the truth. I know what they told me on those calls, and I know what I seen in that house. Slowly, painfully, Justin began to reveal something deeper, something darker. He had evidence of conversations where people tried to provoke Betty into pushing him away. Evidence of people telling her he wanted things he never asked for. Evidence of people telling her lies about him to create distance. Not to protect her, not to provide safety, but to isolate her. That's why they didn't want that trailer moved, he said. They knew it would give her independence. It'd give her choices. They didn't want that. Because control thrives in dependency. And if Betty had a safe home, stable support, and freedom from the manipulation circling her, then the people benefiting from her vulnerability would lose their influence. Justin wasn't the villain in their story. He was the threat. Every revelation connected back to one core truth. The people trying hardest to silence him were the people who stood to lose the most if the truth came out. He pointed out how quickly stories changed depending on who was whispering in Betty's ear that day. You see it, Todd, he said softly. Everybody got a different version of the truth. But the recordings don't change. My words don't change. Betty's voice don't change. That's why they scared of the truth. Justin described the moment someone texted him claiming Betty had been taken to the police to report him, an attempt to intimidate him into silence. Instead of panicking, he calmly explained the law. It ain't illegal. One party just has to know, and that party is me. That phrase, firm, steady, unwavering, marked the moment Justin stopped being a target and became a witness. A witness who wasn't afraid. A witness with receipts. A witness who refused to back down even while sick, exhausted, and fighting against a coordinated effort to discredit him. The showdown wasn't approaching anymore. It had begun. And Justin, for the first time, wasn't just defending himself. He was defending Betty's right to speak for herself. He was defending Larry's right to not be misled. He was defending the truth that everyone else had tried so hard to bury beneath lies, whispers, and rewritten stories. As the call came to an end, Justin's voice almost broke completely. I just want the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. So help me God. Toddy didn't need to respond. The truth was already rising to the surface, and the people who fought hardest to hide were finally starting to panic. The pressure building around the Whittaker conflict reached a point where no one could pretend it was simply a misunderstanding anymore. Justin's name, Betty's name, Larry's name, every one of them was being thrown around online like pieces in a game that none of them agreed to play. And yet, behind the noise, there was still one truth that mattered. For days, messages poured into Toddy's inbox. Some were supportive, some furious, some so unhinged. It was clear they came from people who had never cared about the Whittakers in the first place. They cared about drama. They cared about taking sides. They cared about winning an argument, not understanding the family. But Justin didn't budge. He stayed focused. He continued gathering recordings, screenshots, timestamps, everything that proved his interactions with Betty and Larry were real. He knew what people were saying, that he fabricated calls, that he exaggerated conditions, that he inserted himself for attention. But those accusations came from people who weren't there. People who didn't hear Betty's voice cracking from stress. People who didn't hear Larry struggling to understand what he was being asked to do. People who hadn't watched the confusion settling into the family like a fog. Justin had seen it up close. He had listened. He had cared. And that alone made him a target. One evening, Toddy answered a late call from Justin. His voice was weaker, but his resolve was not. "You know what hurts the most?" Justin asked. "Not that they talk bad about me. Not that they lie on me. It's knowing that the Whittakers are caught in the middle, and they don't even know the half of what's going on around them." He explained how people had been inserting themselves, twisting words, intercepting communication, and rewriting conversations that never happened. Every time someone claimed Betty said something, Justin checked the recordings he had. Never once did Betty's actual words match what people said in her name. What disturbed him most were the three newcomers who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. People who weren't around during the hardest moments, people who didn't lift a finger when the family needed help, yet suddenly had the loudest voices in their lives. "They're trying to isolate her," Justin said. "I've seen this before. Keep her confused, keep her dependent, keep her scared, and then control everything she hears." Toddy knew exactly what he meant. He'd seen the comments, the sudden surges of rewritten narratives, the strangers speaking with absolute certainty about events they never witnessed. Justin's goal wasn't revenge. It wasn't drama. It wasn't clout. He wanted something painfully simple. Clarity. "Let's put them face to face," he repeated. "No whispering. No interference. Let them answer questions on record." Toddy hesitated. He understood the risk. Bringing them together could turn explosive. But he also recognized the alternative was worse, allowing lies to spread unchecked. Justin pressed on. "I got no problem being wrong if I'm wrong. But I ain't wrong. And they know it." The more he spoke, the more it became clear that Justin wasn't fighting for his own reputation anymore. He was fighting for Betty's right to think and speak without someone manipulating the message behind her back. He knew she was overwhelmed. He heard the exhaustion in her voice every time they talked. He knew she didn't understand the online world being weaponized around her. That made her vulnerable, and vulnerability attracts opportunists like moths to a flame. "She told me she ain't mad at me," Justin said. "But then someone around her says she is." How does that happen unless someone is talking for her? It was a question that needed no answer. Days passed, and the interference only grew. More messages from anonymous names, more attempts to intimidate Justin, more emotional manipulation aimed at Betty and Larry. One night, someone even threatened Justin with legal trouble over recorded calls. Calls that were fully legal and properly documented. "They're trying to scare you," Toddy said. "I ain't scared," Justin replied. "I'm tired, but I ain't scared." He wasn't exaggerating. He was physically weak, his voice strained, breath short. Yet he